Hey, this is a video for 8.4, Human Impacts on Wetlands and Mangroves. So go ahead and check out the overview and set up your guided notes. So just recall that wetlands are characterized by the hydrology, by the soil type, and by the makeup of species that are found in the wetland. And by definition, a wetland is underwater at least part of the year. So it is an area that may be dry, have a dry period and a wet period, but the wetlands predominantly that we will see, we have salt marshes, we have swamps, marshes, and bogs. Now the wetlands provide ecosystem services. Most notably, we got our cultural, we can have tourism. There's a lot of tourism in wetlands. The Everglades is a major wetland in the United States. We have fishing, camping, research. Regulating ecosystem services, they recharge the aquifers. Really, probably the most important one to us is they offer protection from floods. They are a buffer. So the plants that are in the wetlands act as a sponge, and they are holding in a lot of this storm surge that might come in. And also these wetlands can filter the water. For provisioning services, the plants and animals provide food for us. And for supporting services, they provide nutrient cycling. And they're also habitats for pollinators, but most importantly, they're habitats for a lot of endangered species. A lot of endangered species are found in wetlands around the world. So we have many impacts on wetlands. For starters, through pollution, we can have pollution by adding nutrients, nutrients leading to eutrophication. We can add sediments, which can impact the turbidity. We can add motor oil, which is can impact the gills of the fish. And in higher levels, it can also be outside of the range of tolerance for many organisms. And a lot of the pollutants we add are endocrine disruptors. Through development, when we're trying to reclaim the wetlands, a lot of them are drained or filled up for urban development or also for agriculture. And once you drain or fill a wetland, it's really hard to bring it back to normal, recreate the wetland once it's been drained or filled. We also do a lot of water diversion projects. So this might reduce the water that is providing a source of liquid for these wetlands. It can also alter the sediment flow to these wetlands. One really important one, the Mississippi Delta, south of New Orleans, at the Gulf of Mexico, a lot of that land has been developed. The wetlands have been drained. It provided very little flood protection from Hurricane Katrina. So that's one of the main reasons or major reasons why New Orleans was overwhelmed at Hurricane Katrina. And also with overharvesting, we are disrupting these food webs. So whether it is cutting down trees, whether it is overharvesting fish that is interrupting the food webs, we are also impacting wetlands in this fashion. So, mangroves. Mangroves are specialized trees that live in coastal areas. If any of you have ever been to the Caribbean, to a beach resort, to Florida, they have them. But mangroves basically live in coastal waters, and they are specially adapted to live in salt water. They have mechanisms that will remove the excess sodium from their tissues. You don't have to know how that works. I don't know all of the details about it, even though I took these wonderful photos when I was in Belize a few years ago. So, also I took this photo too. This was in Key Cocker in Belize, just south of San Pedro. If you've ever been to Belize, it's a beautiful place. Ecosystem services provided by mangroves are tourism and aesthetics. They're very beautiful cultural ecosystem services. For regulating ecosystem services, they provide erosion protection, which is probably the most important, flood protection. They also sequester carbon in the atmosphere. They can help reduce the carbon, keep that back in a relatively equal level, even though it's really difficult this time in our life. But provisioning services, it can provide fuel from the wood, can also provide food products. There's a lot of fish and birds that may live in the areas. Like fish will live in the roots of the mangroves, use it as a shelter so we can go fishing in there. We can also use food products that are obtained from plants or other animals that live within the mangroves. And finally, they have supporting ecosystem services. They will cycle the nutrients. They provide habitats for many organisms, and they can promote fish biodiversity. So mangroves are impacted in coastal areas by having aquaculture and having shrimp farms. Shrimp farms are built on coastal lands, and a lot of times they have to tear down the mangroves. So not only are they having all of the negative impacts of aquaculture, 5.16 if you want to look back at that, but there's a lot of they add so much waste. They add the antibiotics, so they're polluting the water in that fashion. But also they're tearing out the mangroves, which is preventing a lot of flood protection or removing a lot of that flood protection. So that is a definite negative impact from these shrimp farms. You can see an example. This is an image that I took in Belize. This is like a storm wall of some sort. This is like concrete, but it's not really that effective. They must have torn out the mangroves, because just to the other side of this, over on the left, in fact, there's a whole mangrove forest here, and it extends, as far as you can see. But this area was developed, and you can see how the water, this is from the Caribbean, or, which is part of the larger Atlantic Ocean, but this is, during high tide, it's really breaking this down, and it's not really offering that much flood protection. So if there was a hurricane and there was a storm surge, this would provide minimal protection. Mangroves really can reduce erosion. They provide a lot of erosion control. Once you look at these roots, these roots are really intricate, and they do extend. Like, some of them might be 5 feet out of the soil and underneath the water. And that is providing a lot of protection from the erosion. You can see there's a lot of areas in here for fish to live in, for other aquatic organisms to find a home and make this their habitat. But there is the biggest ecosystem service I feel that mangroves do provide for us, at least in the short term, is flood protection. So if you live in a coastal land, it's best to have your mangroves present. Now we have to talk about these two words that have been showing up a lot: remediation and mitigation. Remediation is when you're removing the environmental threat whenever possible. It's like a remedy. Like in this one, you see there's like leaks in this pipe. Well, this might be some sort of toxic pollutant. So fixing the pipe, removing the environmental threat, that is remediation. Now, mitigation is when you have strategies that are trying to minimize the negative effect of an environmental impact or an environmental threat. So, for example, you might, if this is a golf course and it is flooded, you might have a method of opening up a little channel that will allow this to drain. You may plant more other plants because you might have an area that is prone to flooding, but you're going to try to minimize that. So you want to have some plants that really do absorb a lot of moisture. Okay, what I would like you to do is now respond to this check for understanding. And for FRQ practice, describe an ecosystem service provided by mangrove forests. I hope that this video is informative. I thank you for your attention, and I will see you soon.